Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. I am holding it down in a hotel room in Charlottesville, Virginia, and we will tell you more about why that is coming up here. We got a great show for you guys. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and check us out live Monday through Friday here from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. The best of noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. Claudia, fun one today. Who else do we got coming up? What else do we got coming up? Let the people know.
Yeah, lots to discuss about things that happened yesterday and last night, and also what's to come. We're going to be joined by Nicole Auerbach to talk college football, but also, very important, Taylor Swift's new album coming out today. So with that, the Tortured Departments in honor of the album. We'll talk about the fan bases who need some wins, and then broadcaster Belichick. We talked about all the drama yesterday. We're also going to talk about what's to come for him with draft day coverage with Pat McAfee. But guys, of course, we have to talk about what happened last night with the play-ins. The Sixers are going to be facing the Knicks for 7 in the win over the Heat, which was a little bit of sticky, a little sweaty for that one. We'll break that down. And then the Hawks are joining the Warriors on the couch, watching from the outside, thanks to Kobe White dropping 42. And I know we all agreed we didn't really want to talk about that game, so let's talk Sixers and Heat first. Philly ended up squeaking by, guys, just 1 point. They were down 12 at the half, and I think everybody collectively held their breath when we saw Jimmy Butler go down with the injury scare. I may or may not have bet Philly at that point, which didn't cash because they were laying 5.5, but guys, they only won by 1. GoJo, a lot to discuss. Of course, we'll have to keep an eye on Jimmy Butler's injury as they move on for the next elimination game. So what stood out to you the most here?
This game, my best Stefan voice from SNL, this Sixers Heat game had everything. It had drama. It had the home team getting booed at halftime. You mentioned it had Jimmy Butler putting on his cape in this game, because the way we saw him moving around after that knee injury in the first half, and certainly the way he looked after the game, it's a wonder that he was able to pull this off. But I think for me, Dad, and I'll be curious for you, the thing that stuck out most to me about this game was just Joel Embiid being able to persevere through what was a really bad night for him for about 3/4 of this night. He looked gassed. He looked like he was not fully himself, very thrown off by the Miami zone defense. And like most great players, was able to compartmentalize all that to the point where he gets in the fourth quarter and hits the go-ahead 3, has the assist on the Kelly Oubre shot, ends up putting them ahead for the final stanza at the end of this game. And so for as bad a night as that was for Joel Embiid, that's the kind of mental fortitude you expect from a superstar at the end.
Yeah, first the Philadelphia being booed at halftime. I'm not going to lie, I smiled a little bit because I've been part of that. I've been on the receiving end of that a few times in my career when I was in Philadelphia, so I get that one. To me, what stood out was Nick Batum. I mean, this dude saved the game. You know, this is a guy, 16-year vet. He actually came over to the 76ers when they traded Harden to the Clippers. He was with the Clippers, and he came in that trade to Philadelphia. He's a guy that's been around a long time, not really a stat sheet guy, and he went off, yesterday. He went off, coming off the bench, 7 of 12 from the field, 6 of 10 from three-point land. He was just stroking the threes. Because at one point, Philly was down 14 in this game. So we talk about this a lot. You rely on your stars like Embiid, and I agree with everything you said. This is the most minutes he's played since he's come back from the injury. It looked like it got to him. He looked gassed, but he was out there doing his thing because you know what? He had to. Same with when we'll get to Jimmy Butler. Because when everything is on the line, you kind of have to.
Game 7 intense. They said they felt like this had Game 7 playoff intensity. You heard Doris Burke saying that he looked gassed in the warm-ups. Like that jump from regular season to playoffs really did seem to affect him. So you're absolutely right. This was the difference where even if, and we heard Nick Nurse saying, we wish we'd have ramped up. We were worried he didn't get enough minutes going into this one. And that clearly showed up as that jump in intensity happens here.
Yeah, he felt that without a doubt. Playing 38 minutes, he did go 9 of 10 from the free throw line. They were big from the free throw line. 21 of 23 overall when they needed some at the end. Tyler Hero was the guy in Miami knocking down shots for 25. But Jimmy Butler. It's this kind of what was Zion. Now Zion, it was not till the end of the game, 3 minutes to go in the game, when New Orleans was playing the Lakers, and he went out with 3 minutes to go, and the Lakers go on to win. And again, the next games are tomorrow. Zion is out of that one with a hamstring. Jimmy Butler was 2 of 4 in this game before he did a little pump fake, went up for a shot, running into the basket, and came down and grabbed his knee. It turned out it was an MCL, and from that point on, he went, I think it was 3 of 14. So he was hurt, and he was limping badly, but he's another guy. He's going to stay out there. He's going to play through it. He's going to try, but his shooting wasn't there. Now they get one more chance against Chicago on Friday, but we have no idea if he's going to be able to play. Let me tell you, MCLs, Mike, are painful. They are unbelievably painful injuries, so we'll have to see the treatment he gets. We already know Zion's out for his team in New Orleans, where they're the home team in this. Miami's the home team against Chicago, and we got to see if Butler's going to play. But I was surprised in this one for a while with the way Miami was leading this game and in control of this game until, as Embiid said, the game got a little nasty.
GoJo.
Yeah, well, have you say Miami tends to make it nasty with that zone, and I think that was a huge part of it. Like, they play that zone more often and better than anybody in the NBA, and for a team in Philadelphia that was trying to work through Joel Embiid the way they normally do, trying to do that in the middle of that defense, they looked lost inside that zone for a really long time until you started to get a little bit more Tyrese Maxey and some of these guys initiating from the perimeter.
It's also still shocking for me, though.
And I tell you,
I was going to say quickly, Senior, when it comes to zone defense, don't you know not to dribble the ball way out here, Embiid, when Jimmy Butler's right there and he's going to steal it and dunk it, which he did multiple times? It still blows my mind, Senior.
Yeah, Jimmy Butler had a couple of nice steals. That when Embiid was dribbling it out too high, and then on inbound passes when they had just gone to Batum when they were inbounding under the basket, he lobbed a long one, toward midcourt. The second time Butler stepped in and intercepted that one. So Butler's just a good, smart player as well. One of the other things I liked in this, Mike, is the rest kind of let it go. This one was kind of physical.
Kind of.
They weren't blowing the whistle at every little thing. And I thought and there were times though they would let it go, I thought, and then they'd blow the whistle on something. I'm like, wait a minute, if you were letting all this go, why are you blowing the whistle there? That was a little surprising at times, but I thought they had let it go a little bit.
They did. I mean, the only one that really got affected by this, Bam Adebayo picked up a couple of fouls early, which kind of affected things for Miami. But you saw Nick Nurse almost blow a gasket, Dad. It was trending towards slop for a long time because Miami wants to make this a rock fight with the zone defense. Joel Embiid's over in the corner, hands on knees, looking like he's going to pass out. He's like me in fifth grade basketball when I called a timeout because I couldn't catch my breath and I said I needed a tee. That was Joel Embiid last night. And so all of this was trending really bad. Dad, the turning point in this entire game might have been the free chicken promotion. We talked about this with Boban Marjanovic the other day. But in the middle of this game, free throw attempts was from the Miami Heat that went to the line, and we had 2 free throw attempts where if the visiting team misses 2 consecutive free throws, the home crowd all gets free chicken. And the home crowd got the chicken and went absolutely nuts. And Dad, that was the first time after the Boo Birds at halftime that Philly crowd was back in and energized in the game. And it kind of lifted the team. Like, this might go down as the chicken game in Philadelphia.
I love that promotion. Absolutely love the promotion when the visiting. And we'll get into a bit of it later where someone was going a little off the rails on what Boban had done. But I think that is just such the cool thing. And it's a freaking chicken sandwich. And it's amazing how everybody loses their mind over it. I love it. I think it's one of the great promotions that's out there. I think it's fantastic.
I will say it was Caleb Martin, by the way, if we want to give credit to the guy who gave everybody the free protein, who scored just 5 points, which is going to segue this question for you guys because now we have these last 2 elimination games. You talked about the Heat and Pelicans both being home. Pelicans are 1.5-point underdogs against the Kings, of course, with that Williamson injury baked into that price, and then the Heat minus 2.5. And as I'm looking at this game log, Jimmy Butler put up 19, Hero put up 25, and everybody else sort of sprinkled in. Kevin Love, Hekaz, but my question is, if Jimmy Butler's not healthy, where are the points going to come from if you have to rely on Tyler Hero because the defense will adjust there? So these are small spreads, but GoJo, when you look at them, do you have faith in the Heat and the Pelicans to get it done without their most important player possibly?
No, not really for either team. So I think at this time of year, health dictates so much of anything, especially when we're talking about health of the stars. I mean, it's one thing we talked about the other day going into the Kings playing game. Like, yeah, they're missing Kevin Huerter. They're missing some of the guys in the periphery on that team. But when you're talking about the star player who everything's built off of there, and for Jimmy Butler, he more than just Dad, the sum of what he gives you on the basketball court. Jimmy Butler has been the entire personality of that Miami Heat team since he showed up down there. And so, Dad, I want to ask you on that front, Dad, because you mentioned the MCL injury really painful. One of the other things that I thought was kind of interesting with Jimmy is he never really came out. He had to stay in and shoot the free throws or else he was going to have to leave the game. And then he just kind of stayed in after that. And with a lot of injuries, we know the minute you stop moving, that's when things swell up. That's when things start to get stiff. And so if you just keep moving, that's why you see guys in the exercise bike so much. You tend to be able to stave some of that off. For Jimmy Butler now, Dad, is the MCL one of those things where now that he's done and now that he's going to have a night with this, is this when you worry more about inflammation, stiffness, and the other things that would make it difficult for him to get out there?
It is going to be so sore this morning, no doubt about that. Obviously, the movement is key, but you're going to start the rehab process of ice. They're going to get some compression and stay off of it now. But yeah, it is going to be so painful today. To me, it's going to be a tough one. I know Claudia said the line was they were minus 2.5. I would imagine that's going to change if the news comes out and Butler is going to be declared out for this game. This is going to be a tough one. I have more faith in, I would say, Sacramento, or I would say, well, I'm trying to think who I would have more faith in to still to win this game. I'd still say Miami without Jimmy Butler to beat Chicago. Chicago and Atlanta, both two teams that were under 500. Sacramento was 10 games over 500. So I think Sacramento is going to take out New Orleans. But I think, I do think Miami could have a chance without Jimmy Butler because Chicago and Atlanta, they were just two bad teams playing in that game.
I was going to say they have the better matchup, but the issue with both squads, Zion brings some. Pelicans they have enough role players, but they're not very deep, and the Heat aren't deep at all. So I think the Heat get the advantage with the matchup. It's just not really pretty, though. Let's just get to the actual playoffs, shall we?
I think with Zion, too, the thing is now he had become such an important part as an initiator of that offense. So much of the late season surge by this Pelican squad was, hey, what Zion does as a distributor. You saw that in the game against the Lakers, too, at his best in that game. I know his 40 and 11 came on rebounds, but he was a guy you saw a lot at certain elements of that game because he's got such an explosive first step, because he's so comfortable with his handle, can get into the lane, can get the ball out on the perimeter to shooters there. And when you lose a guy that can initiate like that, Brandon Ingram's a great player. They've got other good dudes on that team, but the skill set for Zion is just so special, and they had gotten more of that than ever this year. It's not even like we could fall back on the old trope where it's, well, they're very used to Zion being off the court, and so they know how they operate without him. This is the most games we've seen Zion play. It's a very different experience for them, and so I'm with you, Dad. I think Combine the fact that Zion's importance to that team is pretty integral, and they're playing against the better of the two teams. I would say more faith in Miami in terms of the 7-8 seeds that have now worked down into the second game of the play-in tournament here. Dad, now for Philadelphia, spinning it forward for them, though. They take on the in this next round here. We've also got this nervous thing brewing in the wings where, by the way, Boston Celtics fans might have to grapple with this idea that the Miami Heat could be the team lurking there, waiting there if they're able to get this done now and cement themselves as the 8 seed. Jimmy Butler's presence goes a long way in that. But, Dad, did this game make you feel better or worse about the 76ers' chances going into the series against the Knicks?
That's a good question because the Knicks are played so hot right now. They've been the way they finished the season. And Boston, you have that. Boston's the better team, right? Boston's the best team in the East for sure. But we're all waiting, will they hit the skids in the playoffs because we've seen that before. But they are the better team. So for Philadelphia, I like this matchup. The Knicks obviously have been playing better, but Philly, now we're talking 9 in a row. Even this game doesn't count as anything. It's just out there in the ether. The stats don't count or anything. It's a shame for Kobe White, who scores a career high in a game that doesn't count. So I like this matchup for Philly. Either way, it doesn't matter. You got to go through who you got to go through to get there. A lot's going to depend on Embiid and how he feels through this. More, I think, is going to affect if Miami gets through this game. I think that MCL is really going to be bad for as far as Jimmy Butler, even if he plays, how effective he is going to be, in fact, if they win and go on to play Boston. But for Philadelphia, I think they could be the biggest threat to Boston. So that would mean, that they would go through New York and beat the Knicks. And we'll see. We'll see again the contributions. I can't express it enough. You know who the stars are. You know who the guys, especially now in a series. This was one game last night. In a series, your stars have to be the guys, but others have to step up. And I can't give enough credit again to Nick Batum last night for what he did and how well he did it in a 1-point game. And they needed every bit of what he did to get through.
Well, Dad, listen, Nick Batum understands we're in an important time in hip-hop where we've got all these beefs going on. Everyone's responding. We finally heard back from Drake and everyone popping off in all this beef. And so when Blue Bucks Clan shouts him out the way that he did, Nick Batum had to respond and make sure he felt the heat,
I don't even know what you're saying. I don't even know who you are right now.
I'm lost.
What do you mean? You weren't up to date on all of this? Nick Batum, I don't even know if it catches a stray. It seemed pretty intentional for him. Blue Bucks Clan tries to what the F is Nick Batum doing on the floor in the fourth quarter? And he let him know. 20 points, 6 threes, a bunch of those in the second half here. My guy was out here balling. As far as I'm concerned, that's a clapback. That's an incredible job by him.
Yeah, what you said, I agree. You're right. Wait, I have no idea what you're talking about. Claudia, you have any idea what he's talking about?
This is I almost called it a rap group. Is it though? I'm confused. I don't know who that is. Is it?
You know what? I'll fix it. It's a rapper. It is a rapper. There was a verse that he put out that did diss Nick Batum in a way that was really where the way that athletes get mentioned a bunch of time in songs there, but this one had the line, I believe, is what the F is Batum doing on the floor in the fourth quarter, and a pretty direct response here. I don't know how we can interpret it as anything else.
See, I was focused on go ahead, Senior, because there's other drama I want to talk about. But
how does Batum catch a stray? The guy that doesn't play I don't understand how he's catching strays out there.
I don't get that either. I was looking at Tobias Harris and the Jimmy Butler. That's what everybody was saying. There was going to be a chip on Tobias Harris' shoulder because Jimmy Butler came out saying, you guys took Tobias Harris over me, which I don't. So that was the drama I was focused on. I didn't realize there was rap drama in all of this. So I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's always a lot of stuff at play here, guys. So I'm just trying to make sure that everyone's up to date because this stuff's important. We're living in a very important time right now, Dad.
You're just trying to bring up the music because you know what drops tonight at midnight, and I'm sure you're going to make some references to it during the show today.
Do I ever? Happy Tortured Poets Department Eve Day to all who observe right now. We are mere hours away from Taylor Swift blessing all of us with yet another gift here. We've had so many Easter eggs in the lead up. I am so excited to get my friend and fellow Swiftie Nicole Auerbach on the show later on to try and pour over all of the different fan theories here. We're all sitting around, and I'm sure, Dad, you're in this boat too, trying to wait and see if she's going to also double drop this thing and finally give us Reputation Taylor's version, the way everyone's been thinking about. There's been a lot of these Easter eggs that have the glitch in it here, a lot of things that could be potential anagrams for Reputation here, black themes in some of the colorways. All of it really makes me wonder if it's time to put on the clown mask yet again. Me and the other Swifties, right? And we got a whole new bunch of Swifties for a bunch of people who came over maybe as NFL fans and then got into this through Taylor and Travis. This could be their first album release, baby's first Taylor Swift album release. What a beautiful day.
Are these the Easter eggs that you break open and there's candy inside?
There's music.
You know what, Dad? There's candy for the soul because mother is always giving.
God. Jontay Porter is banned for life from the NBA after an investigation found that he gave information to bettors, he limited his own participation in games to hit bets, and he bet on the NBA himself. The NBA released a statement with all the details, including the 13 bets on NBA games that range from $15 to $22,000 for a total of $54,000. Commissioner Adam Silver gave a quote talking about the integrity of the game. Quote, "There is nothing more important than protecting the integrity of NBA competition for our fans, our teams, and everyone associated with our sport. Working closely with all the relevant stakeholders across the industry, we will continue to work diligently to safeguard our league and game." And GoJo, you would think with such a ban, this sort of sends out the message to every other player across all leagues to just not bet. Period. Just leave it aside. Take the money from the game. And the other side of this is unfortunate because it looks like maybe he had a problem getting into something like this.
Yeah, Claudia, I'm sort of amazed that we're still seeing leagues have to send a message like this, because we have seen this happen elsewhere already. We have seen this happen with Calvin Ridley in the NFL in a big way, but certainly he wasn't alone there. But I think the first major suspension there, we saw it in the college ranks with a lot of the Iowa school athletes that got caught up in this. And so, Dad, for this to still be something that they're working through, this was an opportunity for Adam Silver to send a message, and I think a very easy one. Jontay Porter made it extraordinarily easy on Adam Silver to go and make an example out of here in this case, because Jontay Porter is not a player that the game will miss. Jontay Porter is not someone the NBA had to worry about affecting their bottom line by being out here. He was a fringe player at best, and I don't know, Dad, as someone player myself in here, not having a little bit more respect for the opportunity that you have because they've been so begin with is baffling for me.
This was, to put it in basketball terms, a layup for Adam Silver. I mean, this was about the easiest call as you could be. And a big question out there would be, put a star player in this situation and would he get banned for life? Because this is the punishment that has to happen. This dude pulled off the trifecta, Mike. He pulled off the trifecta. He gave out information on his status. He bet on himself, and he bet on his team. I mean, what the hell are you doing? I mean, this is ridiculously dumb by him. Claudia, to your point on why, he's a guy who's a two-way player, makes a little over $400,000, which, again, to the public out there, that's a lot of money, but in the NBA, it's not. So it would be a guy like this who may try to make extra money doing the gambling. But in my opinion, the legal gambling and the transparency is why they got this, is why he got nailed. So the system is working to flag bets and show that a guy like this, was involved. So I think it's working exactly how it's going to be, because there are going to be people that talk about legalized gambling, but legalized gambling, that this is there. We know the NBA has people that look into where bets are placed. This was flagged by the book going back to the NBA of saying, look, this is going on. I mean, this transparency worked perfectly in this situation, and hopefully it will going forward. But this is let's remember one thing. This is on Jontay Porter. This is completely and 100% on him. Going back to when I played in the old days, I mean, you walked in and there's a huge sign about gambling. You get told every year, be careful who you talk to when they ask you how you are. It may sound like an innocent question, but people are fishing for information. This has gone on forever. Before gambling was legal, when it was illegal, people were still doing things like this and trying to get information. So you have to know as a player what the hell you're doing, and Porter knew what he was doing. And he damn well knew what he was doing was wrong, and he got caught, and he got exactly what should happen to him, or any athlete that does what he does on his own sport is be banned from that sport. Because remember, you can bet on other sports if you're a pro athlete. As we found out in football, you just can't do it in the locker room. You can't do it on a team bus, in a team hotel. You can't do it in any team-associated thing. You just have to be smart about it, and you can't bet on your sport. And God knows you can't bet on you. I mean, these are the simplest rules to follow of all time.
Yeah, and to be clear, he never bet on himself personally, but information given to others on props that involved him all lead to the same place where, Dad, I'm with you.
Right.
There's a day and age now in a conversation that we've had about, hey, certain rules we look at and go, well, how does that make any sense? The rule about NFL players being able to bet on other sports, but not on NFL property or on the locker room or team buses, was one we looked at and said, I don't understand the utility of that. And as we go along, I'm sure there are new rules in these relationships that are going to take a little bit of getting used to, or are going to be a little bit new for certain players. Everything about this Jontay Porter situation has existed in the past. The most common sense version of gambling around sports has always been, hey, don't bet on your sport, your league, your team in any way, shape, and form. And certainly, like you said, don't give out information to other people there. It's just a glaring lack of self-awareness here, right? Lack of self-awareness that this opportunity may be your last at any given turn. A lack of self-awareness that no one was going to notice that someone was trying to get rich off Jontay Porter props. Like that's a normal thing that people do. And then a lack of self-awareness to think that you wouldn't be an easy limb for Adam Silver and the NBA to saw off in terms of making an example. Because again, like most of us who strapped up and played in any sport, the game will not miss him. And that's the sad part, is part of me does feel bad for the young man who's just thrown away any chance he had of being a professional in this league that I'm sure he's worked really hard to. He's a guy that going back to college has battled injury off the court, has worked his way back into the NBA from the G League. And so you want to root for guys like that, but to be this careless with the opportunity is just something I can't understand. And again, it just all reeks of a lack of self-awareness here.
Oh, listen, you want to root for a guy like that, but when a guy just shoots himself blatantly in his own foot, I mean, what are you going to do? He placed 13 bets on NBA games and netted $21,000. Congratulations. 21 grand cost you your career or any chance of the career you were going to have. I mean, like I said, Mike, this has been going on. Athletes have been taught to do this at all times. And for those that don't know, when I said bet on himself, as Mike mentioned, he didn't bet on himself, but he gave out information about himself so people bet the unders on numbers for him. And 3 minutes into that game, he pulled the I feel sick card and didn't play the rest of the game. I mean, it blows my mind how transparent he was and how easily, and as I said, how the system works to catch someone like that. So I'll say again, my bigger question will be if this happens to a bigger time player. But then again, the bigger time players are making so much money. I don't know why they would dive into something like this, in all honesty.
No, it makes very little sense here. Just the glaring red sign. Like, Dad, you mentioned the system working here and catching these kinds. I don't know how hard the system's got to work when someone places $80,000 to win $1.1 million on Jontay Porter unders. How does anyone involved in this criminal mastermind operation think this is going to be the way you hit a lick? I am not sure, but it does underscore overall, everybody involved takes this very seriously, Claudia, from the leagues to the partners and everybody else. The integrity of the game at the heart of this entire conversation is something that shines through and is made abundantly clear by everybody else, and certainly we want to make that clear here as well.
Yes, certainly at DraftKings in March, they entered into the Responsible Online Gaming Association, an independent trade association becoming one of 7 initial member companies. Together, they've pledged $20 million in support. Responsible gaming is important at every level. And while we all love betting, the integrity of the sport is the most important thing. DraftKings, again, one of the 7 initial member companies. We will continue to talk about issues like this. Hopefully we don't have too many more in the future. GoJo.
Yeah. Exactly. And this is one of those examples that hopefully it prevents other people from going down this path, makes somebody think twice, and makes people value, again, the opportunity that you've got. I'm not one of those guys that usually falls back on it's a privilege to play in these leagues. You earn that, but you also want to value the opportunity to make these kind of life-saving sums of money with your skills and live out your dream in this league.
Introduced to Fever fans yesterday, which should have been the headline, but unfortunately it got stolen by Indy Star longtime rider Greg Doyle, who stole the spotlight for all the wrong reasons.
Greg Doyle, Indy Star. Real quick, let me do this.
You like that?
I like that you're here. I like that you're here.
I do that at my family after every game, so
okay, well, let's start doing it to me and we'll get along just fine.
Just so you know, out there, he went like this. Apparently she does that to her family.
She does.
I don't understand the thought process of this man to then go and write an article about it. And instead of just tweeting out, I'm sorry, I was wrong, he goes, I'm sorry, basically click this link to give me some views on an article. I'm going to come out with a column. Buddy, we don't want that. Just say sorry. GoJo, what is this?
This is really uncomfortable. Like, it took me all day yesterday to watch this clip because I saw the transcription of this clip and the secondhand embarrassment was so deep inside me I couldn't actually bring myself to hear the audio until like yesterday afternoon. Because, Dad, listen, while this is not like the most egregious thing that's ever happened, it's also like uncomfortable and inappropriate enough to, I think, be a reminder of what's coming, which is, as we have seen now, a massive rise in the popularity of certainly women's basketball in the last couple of seasons. But I think in general, women's sports is on a real interesting upward trajectory right now that shows no sign of slowing down in a number of different avenues. And I feel like, unfortunately, we're going to see more uncomfortable moments like this where reporters just do not know how to conduct themselves in this kind of setting. Why it's so hard to be normal. If you're doing the flow chart of, what am I supposed to ask in this situation? And for some reason your brain goes, well, is this athlete a man or is this athlete a woman? It should lead to the same place in the flow chart, which is just ask them the question about the sport that you're covering and move on with your life, and shouldn't be that hard, but apparently it is.
And like you said, Claudia, instead of just saying, you know what, sorry, I was wrong, he talks in an article and almost trying to justify it by saying, this is how I conduct my interviews. I'm like, you read it to me earlier. I don't know if you still have that, of basically saying, I kind of, do something or say something a little off base before I ask them the question. So this is kind of how I do things. And I'm like, dude, why are you trying to explain yourself? Just again, I'm sorry, I was wrong for that, and let's move on. But you tried to I don't know if he tried to justify it, but he tried to explain, this is my interviewing technique, I guess.
GoJo, yeah.
I've got the thing right here. So part of the article that he wrote again, which, again, missing the whole point. Like Dad's right. Say, I'm sorry, I messed up, move on with it. We didn't need the article. But the article says here, what happened was the most me thing ever in one way. I'm sort of known locally, Psy, for having awkward conversations with people before asking brashly conversational questions. I've done this for years with Colts coaches Chuck Pagano, Frank Reich, and Shane Steichen. I've done it with Purdue players Carson Edwards and Zach Edey. And I did it with IU's Romeo Langford, talking to them as people, not as athletes. And then goes on to basically make the claim that you notice those are all men, basically trying to say he doesn't treat people any differently, but he's letting that idea treat them as people do a lot of heavy lifting in this case for what that means in a given interaction, because in this interaction, this was weird and uncomfortable. So I don't know if any person wants to be treated like that, man or woman.
It would have been weird, even if it was a dude. Like, that is just a weird thing to say. What do you mean if you're doing it at me? Like, what? Just no. Just everything about it is no. I don't understand this dude, Greg Doyle.
Yeah, just no. And rightfully so, dude's getting dragged everywhere for it, as he should. But, that's Mike, that's his way. That's what he does. Makes that awkward question or awkward conversation before he asks his question. I mean, wow. It just was not a good moment for him at all, and not a good reaction to the moment for him.
The worst part of it is this is taking over the headline, GoJo, though. This is supposed to be about Caitlin Clark entering the WNBA, coming to, be the savior, hopefully, for this Fever team, and yet we're all talking about Greg Doyle.
Well, I think it's kind of an interesting microcosm of what's happening with Caitlin Clark overall at this point, because we saw at the end of the tournament in the women's side, the conversation started to break contain a little bit, where it's, all right, Caitlin Clark's place in this larger ecosystem of women's basketball, the transition that's coming to the WNBA, a little bit of the resistance from the people who see this coronation of a young woman who hasn't played a bit of professional basketball yet and are kind of bristling at that notion, especially the people who helped build this league and the way that they interpret this, because this goes along with the other headline we saw yesterday from Shams over at The Athletic, detailing that Caitlin Clark looks like she is in line for an 8-figure Nike deal that could also include a signature shoe. And Dad, it would make her just the third WNBA athlete to have a signature shoe to go along with Breanna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. The thread between all of them and what we saw last night was a source of bit of discomfort was, all right, not only these young women, but also young white women in a league that is predominantly full of black women who have helped build all of this. I saw more than a few WNBA players tweeting on behalf of Asia Wilson, who does not have a signature shoe, despite being probably the best player currently in the WNBA. And this notion that we've talked about a lot as of late with Caitlin Clark of this idea of great white hoping women's basketball in a way that's made it very uncomfortable in the transition.
Yeah. Let's hope this opens the door for more, whether you're white or black. God knows it shouldn't matter at all. But opening up deals for more shoe deals and more endorsements. I mean, we've talked about, the Clark effect. We've seen it from ticket prices for the Fever and ratings and everything. But and the women's game had been growing. It hasn't started with Caitlin Clark. There have been those that wanted to make that very apparent. And it's true. The game, women's sports, but we're talking about women's basketball here, had been on an upward climb, and Caitlin has taken it to the highest it's been. So we all want it to stay there or possibly go even higher. But that also means to make more money in endorsements, because it always gets brought up what their pay is. She's making $76,000 this year, but she has the deal with Nike and Gatorade and State Farm and Panini. That doesn't go away. It wasn't just when it was in college. She's going to have deals in the WNBA. So let's just stop she's losing money. I mean, I know we've gone through that before. It's just a ridiculous statement to make. It just makes no sense at all, and it just is a lazy narrative. But let's hope it keeps opening the door as the game continues to grow in popularity for more women. Again, women, I don't care the color of their skin, but for more women to have access to these things.
Yeah, and it's not to diminish or say that Caitlin Clark doesn't deserve any of this, right? It's just an acknowledgement that we've seen skin color has played a role in this. There have been people far smarter than me that have gone through and shown the examples of this that have existed historically, even within this league and within women's sports. Caitlin Clark is overwhelmingly deserving of this. And yes, Dad, to your point about Darren, I mean, listen, it's Darren Ravel that led the charge on this, the guy that's supposed to be the business reporter, saying things that are objectively wrong about the perception of Caitlin Clark, what she was making in in college and the opportunity for you in the WNBA. She was not getting paid $76,000 as a base salary in college. She was existing solely off endorsement deals. The NIL collective there was not paying her the way that we see collectives pay out other athletes here. And so Caitlin Clark is, in fact, going to make more money as a pro. The pay cut notion was always silly and stupid, but let this headline hopefully be the last that we have to mention of this now, since it's patently absurd and she's going to go and make a king's ransom, or deservedly so here, I should say a queen's ransom, given the nature of this, deservedly so, for her ability and for the attention that she continues to bring to the game. But like we've seen between this and between the Greg Doyle thing, it's not in the stage where it's going to be all universally positive at this point now. And the pressure just continues to mount on Caitlin. I'm very curious to see how she makes this transition personally. And hopefully the camp that she's got around her is going to be able to help her work through a lot of this, because there's going to be a lot of people, Dad, putting the target on her back now.
Yeah. Oh, listen, and this goes for any big-time player coming out of college, that they're going to have a target on their back, and she is going to. Listen, she's used to playing in front of big crowds, big audiences, big TV audiences. She's been part of all the record-breaking that's gone on. Now she's going to a league where all the play. Well, it's one of the things you say when we ask any player. Normally we talk to football guys a lot of times, or it doesn't matter the sport. When you go to the top level, what's one of the biggest differences outside of anything physical like speed or anything? It's like we're playing against great athletes game in and game out.
Uglier between Robert Kraft and Bill Belichick. Yesterday, we talked about an ESPN article that came out reporting all about the Atlanta Falcons hiring process for their new head coach, and the fact that Kraft called the Falcons and said you shouldn't trust Belichick, and then the Patriots came out and said that's not true. I don't know. The dynasty sort of pointed towards the same direction. However, I was sitting at home yesterday after work, and I looked up to see Bill Belichick, no other than the man himself, smiling on ESPN on Pat McAfee's show.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it. It's always draft day, draft weekend's always an exciting time for everybody, for the teams that are building their teams and for the fans and for everybody involved in it. So, it's a great event. And, I'm looking forward to seeing it, from the other side. It'll be fun to be in Detroit, be with you guys and get your expertise.
Oh, whoa, Bill. We don't need that now. Okay, we don't need that type of chatter now.
All right, this is incredible. So the announcement was Bill Belichick is going to be on the draft broadcast with Pat McAfee and the rest of his guys in Detroit for night one of the draft, which is an awesome get for them. And throughout this interview, Bill Belichick gave some really good insight about when teams leak things in the lead up to the draft and this entire process in a way that, Dad, we talked about this with Tom Brady getting ready to go into the booth. But for Bill Belichick, if he chooses to really dive into this, can offer as unique of insight as anybody who's ever commentated the sport because of his experience alongside Tom that you saw behind him there in the shot of all 6 of those trophies, which to me was the most incredible part of all of that media savvy from Bill Belichick, Dad, is as he's coming out, the day this article drops on ESPN.com with Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham and Jeremy Fowler talking about all of these criticisms of Bill Belichick that led to him not getting the job with Atlanta and not getting a job anywhere this offseason. Here he is, smiling, excited to be a part of a team with everybody else, and reminding you, I have 6 Lombardi trophies and you don't. It's incredible work from Bill top to bottom.
That would be my backdrop for anything I ever did, would be the Lombardi trophies behind me. That is just that's a win. You just see that, say, okay, you win, I lose, and no matter what the conversation is. And Mike, we've seen this time and time again. I have over the decades of now being in the media, and especially now with so many players, current and then former players, getting it in the media, of guys that just rebuffed the media or didn't like the media or didn't deal well with the media and all of a sudden want to become a media personality, right? That's what a lot of people are saying about Bill. Listen to his press conference. He never dealt well with the press. He didn't like the press. And you have to, and now look at him. He's all smiles and everything when he mumbles in his press conferences. You have to remember, press conferences for coaches are all about the narrative that they want to give out, So I don't put a lot into that because I've had conversations with Bill, not about football or outside of that. And he's got a good personality. He's funny. Just talk to him about lacrosse and you'll get him to really open up. So I think he'll be really good. Mike, I remember, man, at ESPN when Jimmy Johnson, they brought him in and brought him for draft day when they brought him in to do the draft. And that's actually when I started first doing TV. I was doing radio for the draft, started doing TV because he came in, and Mike, in our meeting for the draft, I never learned so much about a draft and what goes into it than from Jimmy Johnson. And this is a guy who drafted he was a draft day god with what he did with trades and finding gems in the later rounds. Hearing his theory on how we did everything, I was mesmerized. Now, what worked to my advantage is he was supposed to work a few days of the draft. He worked the first day. Remember how long it used to be? And he was like, I'm done. And they were like, you're done? He's like, yeah, I'm done. They're like, Golic, you're going on TV tomorrow. I'm like, okay, cool. And so I got to do that. So I thank Jimmy for that. But what Bill can offer you now, Bill's drafts at times have not been the best, but we know he is a wheeler and dealer on draft days. But just to hear the inner workings on how they point system things is so intriguing and amazing to me. So I would imagine Pat is smart enough to understand this. It's going to be let Bill talk. And just like in that thing when Bill was like, I'm looking forward to your guys' expertise, and Pat was like, no, just stop. They need to let Bill talk as much as Bill can about what goes on behind the scenes in the draft.
And certainly, like any all-time great at whatever they do, whether it's an athlete or as a coach, it's going to be how good is he at communicating that in a way that the audience can understand. But again, we've been for years pining for some form and some public acknowledgement of, hey, what goes into the Patriot way outside of just do your job and siphoning off responsibilities to people and simplifying the equation for them? What is it behind the scenes that allowed this organization to move the way that they did? It will be funny, to your point, though, Dad. when it gets to the first round and it's like, all right, Bill, what are these receivers do you like in the first round? And then everyone's looking back at him and looking back at the Patriots' history of drafting receivers in the first round and going, all right, maybe this is the one spot we won't necessarily want to value your opinion all that much.
Yeah, that will be what he says and then do the opposite. He said he's been watching film on the first round guys. And listen, we've heard him outside of this. The what he did when it was he and Bill Parcells chatting about their relationship, when he was on set talking about some of the greatest players he's coached or played or coached against. I mean, he does a great job of breaking down football and talking about football, and that's what this is going to be. So I would imagine he's going to be really, really good at this.
I would imagine he's going to be. I'll just be interested because, Dad, even with that, when Bill did all of that stuff, he did it because he wanted to. Like, Bill got to do everything from a position of power up until this point in his career because he was the guy with the 6 trophies, because he has been the coach of the premier dynasty of my lifetime. We will likely never see. As I say this, the Chiefs we know are in the midst of trying to make a dynastic run that can rival what the Patriots did. But until they do it, this is an outlier in terms of how long it lasted, the different forms that it took, and what went into this process with Bill. Now it's a little bit different because we don't know. All right, is Bill going to be pushing really hard to try and get back into the league? Part of that article also talked about, we don't know how many interviews are going to be waiting for Bill Belichick next year. And so this first stanza, not to try and read into it too much, but it felt like a response to that article where, hey, I can be warm. I can be, I can be someone who works well with others. I can do all these things that you say that I can't do here. And so will this be Bill Belichick out to prove, hey, I'm not this old curmudgeon that I'm painted to be. I'm not someone who's stuck in my old ways. I can evolve past this and use this megaphone that he's got right now to broadcast that to other teams around the league. We've seen plenty of coaches, Dad, go through this TV car wash, trying to show this new perspective they've got in the game, and then work themselves back into a job because of it. And I'd just be curious if that's Bill Belichick's ultimate end game with this.
Well, I think we all know Bill Belichick's a pretty smart guy. And I think Bill Belichick still would like to coach because I still think he wants the record. I don't think that's the only reason he wants to coach. I think the guy just loves to coach. We know these coaches. They just want to coach forever. But he also understands that, what he's got to play the game now, right? Now, he didn't get offered a job by anybody, so stay in the game. We've seen coaches do this before, go into the media, and he understands what he has to do in the media to maybe get another interview. I don't know if he will. I think I might believe in that article that his only hope might be Jerry Jones. Again, we keep talking about Mike McCarthy. I mean, and keeping his job there and keeping his job year in and year out. And they win 12 games a year and then don't make it anywhere in the playoffs. But I think I tend to believe that. I don't know if he's going to get another shot. I think they'll say, boy, it looks great out there, doing TV. That's awesome. But I don't know if that's going to change any of these owners' minds and saying, yeah, I'm going to give them control of this team, Claudia.
Well, I was going to say, in that article, it said Cowboys, Eagles, and Giants. And GoJo, if he's trying to break Don Shula's record, I feel like you just take the Giants out of the equation. But Cowboys, Eagles, that could work.
I mean, I love how it was the entire NFC East sans Washington got circled, which, by the way, if you're Washington, I don't know if you feel good or bad about that necessarily, that you're the one team that got excluded. The Bill Belichick sweepstakes going forward. But either way, what a great subplot for the season. If you're all the rest of us, if you're everyone in those organizations, incredibly nerve-wracking to have the greatest coach of all time be linked to your organization potentially as you walk into a hot seat season. That'll only up the pressure in the building and outside of it. And so we'll wait to see if Bill Belichick can, in fact, jump over anybody in the NFC East to make things happen. We're just getting started. Coming up in hour number 2, Nicole Auerbach going to stop by as we get ready for some tortured poets and tortured fan bases that we're going to try and help fix next. GoJo Golic, hour number 2. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Claudia Bellafato here. I'm out in Charlottesville, Virginia. Excited to be down here. Chris Long has now had his 3rd annual golf tournament out here, benefiting his group, the Chris Long Foundation and the Water Boys Foundation, that helps bring clean drinking water to folks in Africa who are desperately in need of it. I've gotten to go and climb Mount Kilimanjaro with Chris. It's been, or not with Chris, but with his foundation. It's an awesome cause. I'm excited to be here. And I'm also excited to have this be the place we get to talk to our next guest here now. Nicole Auerbach, kind enough to join us to start hour number 2 here, senior writer over at The Athletic, college football insider for NBC as well. And Nicole, we've got a ton of great sports to talk to you about today, but this is a holy holiday for the two of us. Dad, Claudia, I don't know how much they're going to be into this, but how are you feeling, Nicole, mere hours away from the release of Taylor Swift's new album, The Tortured Poets Department?
Well, it really hit me last night as I was going to bed. Like, this was the last night I would sleep without knowing what these songs are. So today is a day of a lot of anticipation, some nerves, like, you want to like all of the songs. Like, what if it's a little bit different than we expect? Or what if we, hate the track 5? But ultimately, super excited for it. Need to come up with a strategy in terms of caffeine and napping throughout the day so that I am ready to go at midnight Eastern when this thing drops. But Mike, you know the feeling. Like, there is just nothing better than everyone and all of the Swifties opening their Spotify app at midnight, waiting for it and it crashing and just refreshing and refreshing and waiting and waiting and waiting. And you know that millions and millions of people are also frustrated. But then getting through and hearing that first line, it is an awesome day.
Can I ask a question? And Mike, I'll direct this to you first. I know the album drops at midnight. Nicole, you're talking about, caffeinating out so you're awake. Do you guys know that tomorrow morning the same album will be there? So you can get a good night's sleep and the same songs will be there when you get up in the morning? I mean, am I missing
Nicole,
something?
I want you to explain to my dad. Dad, you know what? Think of this in the tune of sports, right? You could wake up the next morning and watch the Super Bowl. You could wake up the next morning. You could have watched all the NBA games from last night. But you know what you would have missed out on? That community experience of watching all of this together, of taking it in and drinking those moments in live as our natural reactions pour out simultaneously. Nicole, you cover sports all over. You cover a variety of different sports there. This feels like the apt comparison, right? Of waking up the morning after the national championship in college and deciding you want to watch the game now?
This is why we're all still on Twitter, even though it is filled with a lot of bots these days. Like, you want the live reaction. You want to be watching something with people, even when you are just home laying on your own couch. I will say, though, part of this has just been how I've always been wired. When there were new Harry Potter books out, I would stay up and read them. So the final book, Deathly Hallows, I did not want to risk any potential spoilers. And I understand that music is like less of a spoiler issue, but like that moment where you have a song that shocks you or something. I didn't want to risk any of that with music, and I don't want to risk any of that with books, especially. So I napped, and then I went to Barnes & Noble. I picked up my book at midnight, and I stayed up until I finished the book. It was like 700 pages, but I finished it at like 4 p.m. But I did not want to risk any spoilers. So I am this way. I just don't want the outside world to impact my listening or reading or experience on any of this stuff.
So this is dead simultaneously why me and Nicole are friends, and also how different we are, because I also used to stay up, go to Barnes & Nobles or Borders for the release of these Harry Potter books. But Nicole is smarter, more driven than me, and reading all 700 pages of that in one sitting that night is well beyond my capabilities, Dad. So that is simultaneously why me and Nicole are homies, but also why Nicole has succeeded far beyond what I am capable of.
You guys are so much alike, it scares me. It scares me. Now, Nicole, do you dive down the Do you dive down the rabbit hole of the meaning of all these songs and all the stuff that Mike talks about that I don't understand? Are you diving deep into her flashing the peace signal and that it actually means something, or the amount of letters in a word she uses, or all this kind of stuff that just, I'm an inch deep and a mile wide. I could care less about this stuff. I like her music, but I don't dive deep. Are you a deep diver?
Well, it sounds like you are if you're referencing a lot of these very specific Easter eggs that are happening.
No, because I'm reading them right now. I'm reading them right off a piece of paper is what I'm doing. I have no idea about them.
I do not go down all of those rabbit holes, but I will get into some of the like broader, conspiracy theories of like when people think she's going to release an album or re-release Reputation. But no, I've not been following some of the stuff with different letters in the lyrics and the song titles. That part, no. But absolutely, everything about the personal life, like whenever we get a new batch of photos of her and Travis and videos of them at Coachella, am I going to spend an hour in the morning watching every angle? Yes. And am I going to feel great about that? Absolutely. I'm going to feel nice, warm and fuzzy inside. And so that type of stuff, yes, but not necessarily the lyrics deep dive, those types of things. But I feel like the whole culture around it, again, this is why the Swifties, they infiltrated the NFL and then were immediate successes, because they like wanted to learn all about all the different schemes and how things work and how the rules work, because they do have that attention to detail that borders on insane. And I feel like Mike and I are like we're like the 70th percentile on this. We're nowhere near the craziest, but we do know a lot of the things that they're referring to.
Exactly. Just enough to be able to participate in what's legitimately an event and also be an asset as there are different groups coming together. Nicole mentioned the Swifties that became NFL fans with great success. I saw people posting that there were NFL fans now who turned Swiftie through this process with Taylor and Travis that are now also getting to watch their first album drop with Taylor in this way that we've experienced before. So I'm very excited for us. I'm very excited for them. I'm very excited for Taylor because I bet this is going to be a tremendously satisfying evening here. Nicole, I could sit and talk with you for 20 minutes about this entire album, but we've got a lot of other stuff that's gone on, and I wanted to get to something I know you're very passionate about. For everyone that hears you on SiriusXM Radio, Wine Wednesday with you and Chris Budden is always appointment listening. It's always a fun time when I jump on with you guys, and I know you were looking forward to addressing, or maybe not looking forward to, but felt compelled to address what we saw yesterday from Greg Doyle in Indianapolis at the introductory press conference for Caitlin Clark. How did you digest what was an incredibly uncomfortable moment yesterday?
Well, it's one of those where you can only really watch it once because you feel so much secondhand cringe watching it. And then there was a second clip where he referred to, the question was to her coach, but he referred to Caitlin Clark as like, he gave her the key. You have the keys to that. What are you going to do with it? Like, just, this is not how you talk about an adult and about a person with respect. And I feel like both of those clips just show me that not everyone is ready to treat female athletes at the highest level like they should. And I don't even know, like, he's asked some wild questions to male athletes too. So it's not even just that, but it's about like being appropriate. It's about like treating people the way you would want to be treated in that situation. Day one of her being the most anticipated athlete in Indianapolis since Andrew Luck. And that's how you want to start your relationship with her. It was just incredibly frustrating to see. And I obviously, I know he's apologized. I think that was correct. But even I read his column and it was still like halfway through that he still thought it was fine what he said. And right. That it took like a female colleague to be like, dude, no, like this makes people uncomfortable. You're putting her on the spot. It had this like weirdly flirty energy. And then like you also are saying like, you should treat me like your family and friends that you're giving little heart hands to. Like, it was just, there were so many layers to it that he didn't even understand for hours. And that was really frustrating too, because I think all women, especially in male dominated spaces, have been through those situations where you have to kind of smile and grin and bear it and like kind of try to laugh off a comment that makes you really uncomfortable. And that was just really frustrating. I think the part that it didn't immediately sink in what he had done, when anyone else who watched the clip kind of felt it immediately, that he didn't see that. And that's, I think, going to be a very interesting piece as women's sports continue to emerge and become more of like a central focus of the culture. Is we're going to see people who kind of treated them like, oh, like the pat them on their head, like, oh, the girls, like I'm going to the girls game, to support them and write like my one annual column, and maybe it's patronizing or whatever, right? Like that's going to be exposed because of the ecosystem that we're in and the amount of attention that's going to be on these female stars. And so I think everyone needs to check themselves and think about how they are treating everyone that they're interacting with and interviewing, and making sure that they feel comfortable, that they feel respected, and that you are treating them like professionals, like they deserve. And so I'm hopeful that people learn a lot from watching that exchange and think about how they're behaving in those settings too.
Yeah, and even though while he apologized for it, he went on in the article to basically justify saying this is the way I ask questions, yes. And dude, take the L, okay, and move on. Just a cringeworthy moment for him that you're right. It just didn't seem to really understand or get. So moving on from that. We have a vote tomorrow in the NCAA about transfers and immediate playing eligibility, which we all think is going to pass. Take us through that and where we are and the expected vote, which would be today, I guess. I'm sorry, it would be today.
Yeah, so technically the vote happened yesterday. It's just not final until they finish their meeting today. But basically, this is all because of that lawsuit that was filed by 7 attorneys general back in December, challenging the NCAA's multi-transfer rules. So as we all know, they could transfer one time, play right away. And then after that, you're supposed to sit for a year. They essentially argued that violates antitrust law, and also like it affected their earning potential and different things tied to NIL. And ever since that the judge ruled in their favor, there was a TRO, and then they converted it to a preliminary injunction. Basically, it was covering the end of the spring season, which is basically where we are in the academic calendar. And something needed to happen because no one knew what this meant for athletes next year. And like, what if you entered the spring portal window for football right now, right? There was just a lot of uncertainty. And now there is some certainty. The NCAA just changed their rules to match what the courts forced them to do. So basically, as long as you are hitting different academic benchmarks, like, you're still working towards your degree and, and you're not like, ineligible for a different reason on your campus for something else, you are able to transfer and play the next season right away without sitting out, regardless of how many times you've transferred before. So we've seen some multi-transfers in the spring portal window already for football, and they're able to do that knowing for sure they'll be able to play next year. You still can't transfer like mid-season and play for 2 different schools in the same season. So you still have that rule in place, but it certainly leads to a more permanent world of free agency where everyone is eligible to move every season as long as you're hitting those academic benchmarks. And, again, I think sometimes we pay a little bit too much attention to the few players who do transfer 2 or 3 or 4 times. But it's absolutely, in this legal environment, it was what the NCAA had to do because it was restricting players' power, players' ability to do something where coaches are not restricted at all. They could take a new job every single year as well. So it's probably overdue. It's going to be very messy because, again, roster management is very challenging in a world where you essentially have free agency, no salary cap, and the money is through third parties. But that is where we are, and that is why that rule is changing for good now.
And so that changes for good. And it did feel already, Nicole, like we were bordering on that. I think that's why for so many people, a situation like what we had with Tez Walker at the beginning of the season at North Carolina, where he wasn't immediately eligible to play because a waiver that had been a formality was finally getting some pushback as the NCAA had decided, all right, enough was enough in their mind and they were going to stop this. And so now we've codified essentially what felt like was life already. Are there any more changes that are on the horizon with this right now, Nicole? I know coaches, so many people around the NCAA have been lobbying Congress for various guardrails around name, image, and likeness. Is that kind of on the back burner at this point, or is there anything else that we're still paying attention for that could affect the way colleges have to build teams from here on out?
Well, a lot of what people are asking for from Congress has shifted from help around NIL to, hey, please make sure they can't become employees or help us with, an eventual different business model where maybe there's revenue sharing, but we still don't want them to be employees and deal with unions and those types of formal parts of an employment model. So there's some of those efforts that are happening right now when you talk about people going to Congress. And that's still active. That's still something that's happening. There's certainly a lot of pushes and general steps forward within the NCAA, like legislative framework of bringing NIL more in-house. So one of the rules that is also changing this week is that schools can help facilitate, an NIL deal with a third party. So there were all these rules, you couldn't make introductions, you couldn't, we've seen NCAA violations around that. But even go one step further where why can't the school just pay the athlete? Why can't the school say, hey, I want to put you on our tickets for home game X. I want to pay you for that. That's real name, image, likeness, right? That's okay, you're actually valuable. This is not the fake NIL of fake salary NIL of collectives. So I think that there has definitely been a push, and there's a lot of people who'd like to have it more in-house and just kind of cut out the collective piece, or at least change the relationship with the collectives and have the school, be much more direct in putting money in the pockets of their athletes again, and trying not to make them employees, but signing them to an NIL contract or things that you would do as a freelancer. So there's still a lot of that circulating and kind of moving in more in that direction. But you also have just generally a lot of conversations about revenue sharing. Does anyone want to be proactive there and come up with a revenue sharing piece? Do the Big Ten and SEC decide to do that ahead of everyone else because they know what their contracts are going to be paying them and kind of the bullseye on their back? Or does it come out of some of these settlements and some of the court stuff that's happening as well? So there's a lot of moving pieces around the finances with college sports right now. And all of that will impact roster management. And, again, if you ever get to contracts where you can have someone for multiple years and and they can't go to somewhere else if they transfer in conference. And so all of that still feels a little bit further away, obviously tracking unionization efforts and other balls that are being juggled right now. But the bigger thing right now to pay attention to is, if and when revenue sharing gets here, what that looks like. And then also, again, does NIL go in-house so that essentially schools are able to pay their players more directly?
I think that's the big one, too, that most coaches, when you've heard them talk publicly about this, would really be in favor of bringing that control back inside, as they've all had to grapple with now this third-party group being able to dictate some of the terms about how they acquire talent. All fascinating and ever-changing, and that is why we always appreciate it when you can stop by. Everyone, again, read Nicole over at The Athletic, senior writer there, college football insider for NBC, and card-carrying Swifty ready for an exciting evening. But I'll be talking to you in the group chat later on. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks for having me. Everybody get your rest. Get that caffeine. See you all at midnight.
Can't wait.
Wow.
Dad, I know you're going to be so far asleep after this happens, but get ready for some weird text tomorrow morning.
I mean, my answer to when you said, would you do that with the Super Bowl? If the Super Bowl were on at midnight, there's a good chance I'd miss it. Okay? This is at midnight. I mean, midnight. Claudia, are you a Swiftie in any way, shape, or form enough to stay up till midnight for the release of this?
I could not name 5 songs. And the thing to me is, even if it's an awful album, nobody's going to say it's bad. So it's the same thing with Beyonce. I can't. I'm sorry. Respect to Taylor Swift. She has some bangers, but I don't understand the whole thing. I don't. Sorry.
I was getting ready to trust fall you with a Beyonce take that I was worried was coming.
Be careful.
Here. I want to be very clear. This is a pro Beyonce show. We love Queen Bey.
Yeah,
I
she's
love
great.
Cowboy Carter. Had a great time with it. We are nothing but pro Beyonce around here, and we are also pro Tortured Poets Department. And coming up next, we want to help a couple of tortured fan bases world of sports try and find their way to a new day next.
After getting knocked out of the play-in, so didn't even make it near the playoffs by the Kings. And Fox Sports' Nick Wright got into it with the fan base.
I think we have a good idea of what our coach is and is capable of doing since we watched all 82 games this season.
Start to finish, 82 start to finish. Of course, I understand the idea that what you are doing right there is like an appeal to authority fallacy, but I will go with it that you guys are the authority. But then if you want to follow that same exact logical train, then don't you think the general manager, team president, and owner watch it even closer than you guys? No, you don't.
I disagree with that.
No, absolutely not.
I disagree with that.
The same way that you don't watch every single game is the same way they don't.
And I can just see Nick Wright like in his bedroom leaning over his phone because Twitter Spaces can get a little crazy. Everybody's talking over each other. Interesting, though, to see him do this. So with that, in honor of Taylor Swift's new album, we're going to talk about tortured fan bases, which I don't think you could say the Warriors are because they have 4 championships in the last 10 years. But if we were to bring up some NBA teams that come to mind, GoJo, who's the first team for you?
Well, I do just want to say on that, masterful work by Nick Wright in that Twitter Spaces. That is dad peak fan brain. And you've been doing this a lot longer than me, so I'm sure you've encountered this. I had to go to war on fan base and Notre Dame fans as it concerned Tommy Rees years ago. And this pops up a lot where, yes, there is a certain level of expertise that comes from watching over a long period of time, having enough familiarity with the subject because you're there day in and day out. But to then Nick's point, if you want to place the premium on that, a lot of people only know so much of what they're watching as opposed to those people involved that they want to criticize. And it's not to say that people on these teams are above criticism. It's just to say it's flawed logic overall. And Nick did a great job of pointing that out.
Yeah, he was absolutely right in the steps he took for that. As far as the tortured fan base in the NBA, I look at two. Going to Claudia's question, I look at the 76ers of finishing the process while you have Joel Embiid, of how long we've been talking about the process and not coming to fruition, and it looked good this year, and then he got Joel got hurt. Now he's back, and now they're back in this thing playing the Knicks as the two. They're the 2 seed. The Knicks are the 2 seed, I should say. Sixers are the 7 seed. The other is OKC. Remember, at one point, they had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden on that team. I mean, that was the triumphant trio that they had on that team, and couldn't close the deal there. And then they've been in anonymity. And now one of the youngest teams we've seen in a long time, top of the conference in the West. So, man, that's been certainly a tortured fan base. And could they pull something off possibly?
Oklahoma City is an interesting one to consider because I think part of this idea of tortured fan bases is about the expectation, right? Like the reason we all sort of laughed at the notion that Golden State fans would be considered this way at all, as people were loving tap dancing all over their grave the other night, because Golden State, a lot like we make fun of Claudia and Boston fans, you've had so much already. No one is ever going to look at your plight. You could see these Warrior fans go through a drought of a decade now where they were terrible, and no one would feel bad for them because they got to enjoy having a dynasty, something so rare in the world of sports. Same goes for the Patriots and a lot of these teams. Oklahoma, the expectation is a little bit action, Dad, where, yeah, they've had these big names. Yeah, they know what it's like to go through these droughts. But part of me makes me wonder, are they just happy to be back in this place? Like, they have found a way once again, because Sam Presti masterfully built this war chest over time, to now get to a point where, hey, not only are you incredibly competitive again, but you've got stars that we can point to. You've got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's an MVP candidate. You've got Chet Holmgren, who looks like this next wave of freak athlete. Yeah, part of me wonders, it's like, hey, you've already got a fair amount relative to expectation if you're an OKC.
Yeah. So who's your pick?
So I would say the 76ers are a good one just for all the reasons that you mentioned. And they're so close. Like, it's got a real Sisyphus feel to it where you're pushing that boulder up the hill. And every time you think Joel Embiid's got what it takes to get it over the hill, he's this premier Philadelphia athlete. He understands the mindset of the city. When they were getting booed last night, I thought Joel Embiid is the perfect player for this to happen to, because he understands this fan base and he knows, hey, I got to just go out and do what I did in the fourth quarter and all gets forgiven around here. And so I do think that applies to Philadelphia. But, Dad, the one that jumped off the page for me was the Knicks, right? You've got a fan base that lives in a place that wants to be a basketball town so badly in its core. It's had success with other teams. It's had the Yankees for years. It's got Eli Manning's giant Super Bowls. It's had other stuff. But New York wants to be a basketball town. Madison Square Garden is this palace that other people love to come and play in. And you've had an owner in sports in James Dolan who has made life miserable for almost everyone else involved. And I do think that's a factor in it as well, is you've got ownership in this organization. Hell, we just had Pablo Torre finds out the other day the embarrassing Knicks recruiting video they tried to use on LeBron. That's what they've been dealing with as they've been trying to work back to this point. And so the fact that now the Knicks are actually a respectable basketball outfit seems to fly in the face of every odds and makes me see a fan base that would be most inclined to fit this.
I was going to say the Suns and Clippers come to mind for me too. And Senior, I don't know if you want to speak on either of these because you guys gave good answers, but when I'm thinking rosters, as a Celtics fan, I was super excited to see how deep we were, even deeper than we were last year. So maybe we can get it done this year. But I look at a squad like the Suns and Clippers, and you think if everybody's healthy and playing together, they should be dominating. So as a fan, I would be tortured if they don't make some sort of run in the playoffs, no?
Yeah. I know we want to get to the NFL, but a quick note on that. I like the Clippers one for the fact of they're always on the back page compared to the Lakers, right?
Yeah.
So they always want to do something to try and jump the Lakers. They're not going to jump the Lakers, but one good way to do that would be to win a championship, and the Lakers not.
I think the Clippers are kind of the perfect answer for this, Dad, because they have constantly been little brother. They're in a major market. They've got a team, but it's also tenuously built, focusing superstars that are riddled with injury. So absolutely think that one makes sense. I know we were going to mention an NFL fan base in this, especially, Dad, relative to the draft, but this also feels, I guess it shouldn't say kind of easy. Like Washington, a lot of the same things that we said about the Knicks can apply to them, although it's a new day for ownership with the Commanders and they've got a top pick. But Chicago, Dad, I mean, the fact that Caleb Williams still has a chance to, I believe, be what? The first Bears quarterback to ever be a 3,000-yard passer? The bar's insanely low, which also speaks to just how difficult it's been to try and answer the bell at that position for this one franchise.
Yeah, they have been tortured for a while. Minnesota, in getting to Super Bowls and losing Super Bowls. You want to throw Buffalo in there? Because we're talking about winning a championship. Buffalo losing 4 straight, even though I would take that over never going to a Super Bowl. So, Chicago, I know it's been 85 since they won a Super Bowl. That's a long, long time ago. So they have been tortured. But to get there and not have won them like Minnesota hasn't or like Buffalo hasn't, that's just, getting right to one hand to the top of the mountain and you get shoved off, and lose the Super Bowl.
Guys, it's been a few years for the Patriots. What about this tortured fan?
Stop it. No.
I'm kidding.
Just stop it.
I'm kidding. It was bad last year, though. I'll give you that.
There's a part of you that isn't, though, and there's a part of fans that isn't, because it is, in its own way, a different brand of torture to go from being in the penthouse to being in the outhouse. Now, we'll wait and see. Obviously, whole new basically organization there in New England post-Belichick era, and that's a different kind of torture. But, Claudia, you mentioned the name. Probably disrespectful not to make this Buffalo. Their whole organization's history in the NFL is defined by pain. It's defined by being close but no cigar. And now we've got this modern iteration where, hell, you've got a team with one of the superpower nuclear options at quarterback that finally got to take over their division after that Patriot run, only to run into Patrick Mahomes, yet another generational force that looks like he might put a lid on a team that probably otherwise would have won a Super Bowl at some point in this recent run of seasons, and instead now is getting ready to turn the page on a bunch of aging talent, try and reimagine this roster around their quarterback who they had to finally pay, all the while just dousing each other in condiments and jumping through tables on fire. If that doesn't sound like self-torture, I don't know what does.
join Golic to continue our Taylor Swift-inspired tortured fan base conversation. And we're going to take it to the ice, guys. NHL, tortured fan base needing a cup. And I know everybody wants to talk about the Leafs, but can we not? Because the Bruins have them in the first round, and I would really hate for that if they get some good luck here.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, the Leafs conversation, and shout out to my buddy Ryan Matlack, my former teammate and colleague over at ESPN, who I had to watch go through this torture almost every year in the postseason with the Leafs. Thankfully, last year, finally able to win a playoff series. Forget just getting to the cup. It had been 18 years since the Leafs even won series, Dad, before finally getting that monkey off their back last year. And so, yeah, Claudia, I guess now you have to be a little bit more nervous because you've got a team that finally got rid of that and maybe can play a little bit freer. But, Dad, it's got to be overwhelmingly in that. I mean, we already know the affinity with Canada and hockey to begin with, but this Leafs fan base has been through hell and back.
No, I'm going bigger than that. I'm going the Canadian fan base. I mean, when you say hockey, you think of Canada, right? Do you know how long it's been since they've had a Stanley Cup champion? Anybody want to take a guess at this one? It's been a long time.
Long time.
Forget the guessing. 1993. 1993, the Montreal Canadiens. And there was a run there, like from 84 to 93, there were 8 Canadian teams that won a title, but there haven't been one since 93. That is a tortured fan base, the home of hockey in Canada, and they can't get a Canadian team to win a Stanley Cup in decades. So to me, that's the tortured fan base.
Sick part of me that kind of loves that for you. I'm not going to lie. There's a sick part. Again, I have a lot of Canadian friends, love all of them, want to see good things for them, appreciate the importance of hockey to Canada. Part of me loves that as an American fan. USA, USA, USA. But yeah, I think answer being overwhelmingly Canadian here is full of kindness here. I thank them for giving us Shorzy. I thank them for giving us copious amounts of maple syrup. I appreciate their universal health care. Maybe you guys can't have everything. Maybe this is the price that you pay for all that. Who knows? Who's to say? Claudia, let's get to some individual players. We've gone fan bases. We've gone team level here. Let's go department here as we look at your Boston Celtics in the NBA. I feel like Jason Tatum's getting close. Right? Like the NBA is tricky with this because a lot of times with these guys, we talk about someone who has yet to win an MVP. Joel Embiid finally getting that accomplishment off his to-do list last season. We talk about guys that have failed to win a title. Nikola Jokic before last year was someone who had accomplished enough in terms of success where we look at his lack of team success and held that against his legacy. I don't feel like we've thrown Jason Tatum into those fires yet, but this season's clutch conversation that seems to be the one thing people point to as that Achilles heel going into this postseason feels like the beginning of something, Claudia. Have I missed that? Boots on the ground there in Boston. Has this conversation already been had about Jason Tatum, or are we still kind of in this extended honeymoon?
Yeah, I think that's the issue you have with any relatively young, I think we can still call him a relatively young player, when you're on the best team, expected to go even before the season even starts, all the way to win the finals, and you're the best player on that team, you're going to have sky-high expectations, which he did. But you mentioned it, the clutch time situations where he is vocally saying, I don't want to be the guy with the ball in my hands because I don't want to hijack the game. Already there's disappointment brewing for Celtics fans. So what are we going to all expect when it comes to crunch time in a Game 7 in the playoffs? Tatum's going to be afraid of the ball. But if he doesn't and he steps up and they win, then yes, everybody's going to give him his flowers. But that sort of pressure, I guess, does put him in this conversation. It just feels a little wrong to compare him to the other guys you just did. But I guess if we're checking boxes, he does fit.
Would Luka be in there? Luka's just 25, though.
That's what I'm saying.
It feels like he's been playing forever, So it's tough for me to put guys that young in there, that's like, oh my God, the drought of them not winning a championship. It feels odd to say guys that young are in a championship drought.
He's just tortured, Senior. He's not tortured by not winning. He's just tortured because every single game he has to drop 30, 30, and 20,
It does seem like we're in this weird middle ground, though, because I think for so long, the player that people treated like this certainly was LeBron for a long time before he went down to Miami and started winning championships. Then you had Kevin Durant, who was maligned even when he went and won championships out in Golden State for the way that he went about this. I feel like we're kind of in this middle ground now where I don't know, post Nikola Jokic especially, we have a player that we can necessarily point to. Like for Jason Tatum, you can throw into this conversation. Never been a player that's finished very high in the MVP voting, doesn't have any of those on his mantle, doesn't have a championship either, despite being a top 75 player all time and someone we view in that light, who now is finally out of that circumstance where we thought, all right, maybe this is where we start talking about Damian Lillard in this way, where, all right, now you're going to be held to the same standard we've held a lot of other superstars to, where you're expected to go out here and deliver a championship in the sport where you can have the biggest impact on that, Dad.
Damian Lillard now is a name that came up for me. At least he's a guy who's been around for a while, 33 years old, talking about staying in Portland. I'm going to do it here. I'm going to do it here. Getting close, but not getting it done. And finally relenting and basically telling the team, let's add to, not rebuild. They went the other way. He said, all right, I'm out. Goes to Milwaukee with Giannis. You think we got a chance. And they're in the playoffs, and they certainly have a chance, but Giannis not going to be around the first round. Talk of, is he going to be one and done in Milwaukee? That's a guy that a lot of people love the fact that he hung so long in Portland and was just tortured, to use that word, year after year, and him staying there and saying, I want to be loyal here, and got no payoff from it as far as the championship is concerned.
I would say Chris Paul is one name that comes to mind. I feel like everybody talks about him too, although he's been sort of useless now at this point. I only know because I bet on him, and he hasn't made me any money. Curious though, does any football player come to mind for you guys? Any quarterback besides Josh?
I think we do this. I think we do this less with quarterbacks than guys, though. I guess I shouldn't say that totally, but again, youth is also a big part of this right now, where it doesn't feel like we have a ton of those aging veteran quarterbacks that lack the hardware. Matthew Stafford wins the Super Bowl a few years ago. I think he was a guy for a while people looked at, former top overall pick, wasn't able to get Detroit over the hump, but comes to Los Angeles and is absolutely a huge part of why they win that, in a way that sort of erases a bunch of that doubt. And so I don't know. We're kind of at an interesting crossroads, I think, in a lot of these sports, where either so many of our players are young and have time to accomplish, or are young and already have accomplished. Like I look at Giannis, who is already a MVPs, won the championship and got that out of the way. Kawhi Leonard, even though now we're looking at this Clippers team like, hey, what's up? Are you going to do something? Kawhi's got the hardware already. He's a made man in terms of his legacy in the NBA. We've got a lot of people that are already secure in their station, and we've got to kind of wait now to see, of this next generation of players that are getting ready to come up, is anyone going to accomplish long enough with a big enough name but ultimately fall short for us to make easy first take topic bars out of? And right now it does seem like we're kind on all of that, which good for all these players. I'd have to imagine, Dad, the one that's going to mount fast is Wemby, right? Where we're already having accelerated conversations about his place as the best player in the NBA sooner rather than later. If this is a guy that all of a sudden starts to go a longer stretch without a championship, I think him, Luka, and maybe Tatum, but Tatum's never really even been considered a guy that, like, on his own we go, yeah, best there. It's always been Tatum and Brown. It's always been a duo. I don't know if he necessarily falls into the same category as a guy like Luka, or certainly what Wemby's about to become.
Yeah, I think Wemby could be the next one out there, of how quickly they can build something around him to help him get that championship again. Certainly what Greg Popovich has done in the past there has been dynastic. But I think that would be a name coming up. But to your point, especially going back to football again, a lot of younger players, so it's tough to really talk about tortured at this point, when a lot of these guys have a lot of their career left.
Kirk Cousins probably feels a little tortured, though, and he doesn't have a lot of time left.
Kirk Cousins might feel a little bit tortured. A good thing he signed with Check's Notes, the most tortured team in the NFL, and maybe the most tortured sports city there is, in Atlanta. Good luck, Kirko. Good luck. All right, time to finish up the show the way we always do. Just that and the third, 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out live Monday through Friday here, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. You can also check us out, the best of GoJo and Golic, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on your radios. And if you miss any of it in those spots, here are our great guests. Shout out to Nicole Auerbach from The Athletic and NBC Sports, who stopped by to help us preview Taylor Swift, talk about some new NCAA rule changes, and a little bit of Caitlin Clark's transition to the Indiana Fever. You can catch that wherever you get your podcasts or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. Guys, let's start off with this. We are a show that just did an entire Starch Madness bracket. We certainly appreciate chain restaurants, fast casual, the entire delightful cookie cutter eats. And the NFL does too. They have decided, according to James Palmer over at the NFL Network, to name Applebee's the official grill and bar of the NFL. A multi-year deal announced just the other day. Dad, I know we're largely a Chili's family, so how do you feel about Applebee's getting the nod here?
Oh, I'm good with it. I'm a big Applebee's fan, so I have no problem with that. I like Applebee's. I think they have like the lava chocolate cake, so that's always good for me. But I'm an Applebee's fan. I mean, I like Chili's. I like Applebee's. To me, not one really stands out over the other. I can find something on the menus that I'm going to like, from appetizer to main dish to dessert. So
what?
I'm cool with it. I got no problem with it.
Trying to act like Applebee's and Chili's are comparable.
I thought
as
they were
if
the
you're
same
having
thing.
the same
Yes,
experience.
they are.
What?
No, honestly, the only
Come
reason
on.
I know about Chili's is because of their lava cake. So when Senior just said that, I was like, oh, they're technically the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
There's not
it's
a
the
ton of
triple
difference.
chocolate
Come
melt.
on, Mike.
And
Seriously.
listen, this shows you there is a ton of difference. I couldn't even have named you an Applebee's menu item 5 minutes ago. I had to look this up right now. How dare debase Chili's and everything they've
an
meant to our
Applebee's
family.
Item. They basically serve the same food. They just might call it something different.
I don't
You think
know
you
if
can
they
get a
have
burger
Oh, yeah, listen, they serve burgers everywhere. I'm talking about the unique stuff, like the molten lava cake, which isn't what they serve at Applebee's. I'm talking about the skillet queso. You think the fajita experience is the same there? Bite your tongue. This is just despicable.
Hold on. You're just saying that Chili's serves the molten lava cake. Applebee's serves the triple chocolate meltdown. It's the same
Is that
thing.
the molten
Just
lava
name
cake?
It looks the same.
Is it set up? It does not look the same because the molten lava cake, they put the ice cream on top because it's the lava coming down from the volcano that is the chocolate cake. Here, the ice cream is served on the side because they're to embrace natural disaster.
That is a molten lava cake.
Oh, my God.
If I've ever seen one.
Stop it, Mike. Cake, or else they call it a molten lava cake, but they can't because that's Chili's. I can't believe I have to explain this to you guys.
You are
it's embarrassing.
You are so wrong here. So wrong. They have a sizzling butter pecan brownie with ice cream on top of it. You got dusted sugar donuts that you have with dipping sauce, mini cinnamon swirl bites. I mean, come on. They're the same places. They just a little bit different here and there. Come on. They obviously gave the NFL more money.
They are not the same place. I will not stand for the slander of the Chili's quality. It's a better fast casual chain restaurant. Actually, no, it's not fast casual. It's a sit-down restaurant, but it's a wonderful chain restaurant. And Chili's is by far the superior one of the group that we are talking about here. And it honestly scares me that I have to explain this to you. A man who grew up with a Chili's, mere feet from us in Simsbury, Connecticut, the Simsbury Hoyts Plaza, where I used to hang out all the time during elementary, middle school, and high school. It's embarrassing.
I'm not disparaging Chili's. I love Chili's, but I love Applebee's. I love them both. I would eat in both of them. I'm not saying one is bad and the other is good. I'm saying they're both really good. I like and enjoy them both. You're making it sound like Applebee's is trash. It is not.
I'm not saying it's trash. I'm just saying it's not as good as Chili's. And that's an objective fact. That is not an opinion that you get to dispute.
Whatever. Move on.
All right, speaking of eating, Claudia, let's get to that. Joel Embiid's eating chips.
Yes. Things heating up in the NBA playoffs as they are for Embiid at home, apparently. He did the hot chip challenge.
The pocket watching challenge is back. Let's go. It's all good. I'm not feeling it at all. It's fine. I'm African, we don't feel anything. I don't have any regrets. Now it's in my ears. I'm not even sweating. Right there in my throat. I can't do this. Hold on. 2 more minutes. I'll taste it a little bit.
He was, in fact, dripping sweat, in case you were wondering. And then he ends it by challenging D'Angelo Russell, Cat, and his teammates. GoJo, you did this, correct? If I heard correctly?
So we did this years ago on Mike and Mike when we were still at ESPN, and it reduced me to ash and rubble. I was wiping my nose with bread and then eating it. I cursed multiple times on live TV and radio. Dad, I'm just wondering what it is. It's like people falling down and farting is always funny, and somehow we are always enamored by people eating hot things. It's obviously Hot Ones has built an entire empire off this, but I am amazed that we always wind up going back to this kind of hot chip challenge.
I'm amazed at the difference. And it wasn't Mike and Mike. It was me, you, and Trey. It was after Mike and Mike, because I remember Trey Wingo ate the chip and it didn't affect him. So much so, he hosted NFL Live later that day and ate a chip on there as well and did it again. So it is amazing how it affects some people. It didn't affect him. It affected me a bit. It was hot. You, Claudia, you should be able to pull this up somewhere. Mike hit the deck. I mean, the amount of beeps they had to do for the swearing that he did, he was brutalized. I did not think he was going to make it back from this one. It absolutely crushed him.
So, GoJo, what does that say about you? If Wingo's cool, then your dad's fine.
I'm not a prude when it comes to spicy stuff either. I just think if it hits you right way, that's amore, and all of a sudden you're going down with the ship. So that was my experience with that. I never want to go back to that either. Like, I love hot stuff to a point, but challenge hot stuff, that's not enjoyable, making my mouth feel like that. So unless I'm going on Hot Ones, which, worth it for the promotion, absolutely would, I'm probably going to sit the next few plays out on this, as should our final installment of this in the third, Claudia. Jason Kelce just cannot hold on to his Super Bowl ring to save his life.
Yeah, he lost it in a Skyline Bowl of chili, which are we super surprised at this? Like, it's shocking, but it's Jason Kelce. I don't know. I'm not too shocked.
It wasn't a bowl of chili, Claudia. It was a kiddie pool full of chili. So they did their live podcast back at the University of Cincinnati, and they included a set of games called the Lambaby Games, where they had Cincinnati student athletes compete against Cincinnati students. They dubbed the Nerd Team, and part of it was in honor of Jason Kelce, who is well known for constantly losing his by storing it in a sock in his dresser. They put a bunch of fake Super Bowl rings into a bunch of socks and then put his real Super Bowl ring into a sock and had these students go and comb through this Cincinnati Skyline chili to try and find it, and then couldn't find it. And the whole New Heights team was sitting there trying to comb through it. Like, Dad, he was very calm about this. As someone that never won a Super Bowl, how do you feel watching him just carelessly throw this thing about that you worked your whole career for?
Well, I mean, listen, it's more the joy of winning it. I get you have the piece of hardware. I would be frantic, don't get me wrong, in trying to find it. But I don't know if I would lose my mind too badly, in all honesty. I think other people would. And boy, somebody else trying to find that and all of a sudden it's up on eBay would be a bit of a bummer, that's for sure.
Somebody definitely found it. I'm sorry, but somebody has that ring.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so true. Someone for sure pocketed it and now is getting ready to, I'm sure, get themselves caught by flexing on Instagram or TikTok that they've got Jason Kelce's Super Bowl ring. Going for, that's what the molten lava cake looks like right there. You cowards, you put the ice cream on the top, the chocolate mimics the lava. Everyone have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.